Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here, and today we have to talk about something that unfortunately I've been predicting since the beginning of the Ukraine war, as have many cybersecurity professionals that have been following along deeply with this war, and that is Russia is now taking over Ukraine's internet. This is what's going on. This is what's going to look like for the Ukrainians, and I'm cribbing basically a good primer from this from Matt Burgess of Wired, who had a really solid piece on this one today, just pulling elements out of it. It's a great read. Go read it. You're going to get some of that here. So here's what's going on essentially. And as a backdrop, we need to go back to May 30 because web pages in the city of Kherson in South Ukraine stopped loading on people's devices at exactly 2:43 p.m. on that day. And then for the next hour or so, 59 minutes, anybody connecting to the internet with Kherson Telecom, locally known as Skynet, that now we know where it originates, basically they couldn't call loved ones, they couldn't get to news, they couldn't upload images, they couldn't do anything on the internet whatsoever. They basically were stuck in a communications blackout for 59 minutes. And when web pages did start coming back to life at 3:42 p.m., everything appeared to be normal. But behind the scenes, though, everything had changed. Now all of the internet traffic from Kherson Telecom was passing through a Russian provider, and there we are. That's obviously a huge problem because we're going to be talking about what Russia does with their internet. Now, since the end of May, basically the 280,000 people living in that occupied port city and its surrounding areas have faced constant online disruptions as internet service providers have been forced to reroute their connections through Russian infrastructure. Meaning, if you're sitting in Kherson and you open up your phone and you go to Facebook or whatever, you're actually hitting Kherson Telecom, which is then taking you to Russia, and Russia is completing that route for you, or Russian internet service providers, I should say. Now, multiple Ukrainian ISPs or internet service providers are now forced to switch their services to Russian providers and obviously expose their customers to the country's vast surveillance and censorship network, and that's obviously a huge problem. And there you go. Now, the internet companies basically have been told to reroute their connections under Russia, basically under the watchful eye of Russia's occupying forces, and shut down their connections entirely if they refuse to do so. And that's essentially being enforced by the Russian military. In addition to this, an unbranded, basically new and unbranded mobile SIM cards using Russian phone numbers are being circulated in the region, which is obviously pushing people towards Russian networks. A SIM card in your phone is basically what connects you to your local cellular provider. So if you have, let's say here in the United States, Verizon or Sprint or AT&T, and basically let's say you pull out that Verizon card and pop in an AT&T card, now you're connecting to AT&T through the AT&T service. And that's essentially what we are talking about here. You're popping out that Ukrainian SIM card, putting in a Russian SIM card, and now that is obviously connecting you to the Russian, basically cellular network. Huge issue. Now, they're also taking control of servers, cables, cell phone towers. All of these things are classed as critical infrastructure for any country, and this is allowing basically people to freely access the web, and it's considered one of those first things in the Russification of Ukraine, meaning they are going to get a wholly unique Russian experience with their phones and their internet connections. Now, all of Kherson Telecom's traffic is now being rerouted through a company called Miranda Media. This is a Crimea-based company that itself is connected to the Russian national telecom provider Rostelecom. This was actually installed back in 2014 when Russia invaded and took over Crimea, which is the area that we are talking about here, in and around that area. That's where Miranda Media basically is located, obviously a subsidiary or in some way, shape, or form related to Rostelecom, one of the large providers in Russia. Now, the day after Kherson Telecom made its latest switch, state-controlled Russian media outlet RIA Novosti claimed that Kherson and Zaporizhzhia areas, and I apologize for butchering that one, those areas were officially being moved to Russian internet connections, and basically the outlet also said that the regions were going to start using the Russian telephone code, which is +7 here in the United States, we're +1. So with that, Viktor Zahora, who's the deputy head of Ukraine's cybersecurity agency, known as the State Services for Special Communications and Information Protection, or the SSCIP, says that basically across occupied regions of Ukraine, including Kherson, Luhansk, Donetsk, as well as the Zaporizhzhia, and again, apologize for that one, there is a patchwork of about 1,200 different internet service providers, meaning we have small internet service providers here, but obviously the vast majority of this country is controlled by the Verizons and AT&Ts of the world and Comcast, etc. To quote for the record Mr. Zahora, we understand that most of them are forced to connect to Russian telecom infrastructure and reroute traffic, meaning essentially wherever the Russians are occupying and they've got a stabilized military presence there, meaning they're occupying the city with obviously resistance, but they're holding it, they are now forcing the internet service providers to use Russian infrastructure. Now, there are multiple ways that Russian forces are taking over these internet systems. First things first, there is a physical access, meaning troops are basically going into the data centers. They're seizing equipment. Spokespeople for two of Ukraine's largest internet providers, one's called Kyivstar and the other is LifeCell, say that their equipment in Kherson was switched off by Russian occupying forces, and they don't have physical access to restore or repair any of the equipment that the Russians may have stolen, damaged, or simply turned off. Now, throughout the war, internet engineers have been working amid shelling and attacks to repair damaged equipment. I've talked about that actually extensively. I've had, as you know, interviews, if you are a regular follower of me, interviews with their members of parliament through their internet, obviously in Kyiv and around Kyiv and also in Western Ukraine. And there hasn't been a problem. Now, one of the concerns is how are they going to get the message out when the Russians can simply block, let's say, the Zoom meeting I'm going to have with a member of parliament. Now, the SSSCIP also says that 20% of telecommunications infrastructure across the entirety of Ukraine has been damaged or destroyed, and tens of thousands of kilometers of fiber networks are not functioning, whether they are destroyed, let's say, due to bombing, shellings, all those kinds of things, are simply switched off. That is what we have yet to determine. Now, once Russian forces have control of the equipment, they can then tell the Ukrainian staff to reconfigure the networks to route to Miranda Media, and there you are. And to quote Zahora again, in case the local employees of these ISPs are not willing to help them with the reconfiguration, they are able to do it by themselves, meaning the Russians have essentially infrastructure engineers, I guess along with their military, that know how to reconfigure routing equipment. Think like, Cisco or Juniper or Palo Alto, take your pick. Now, the SSSCIP also, he added, has advised staff not to risk their own lives or the lives of their families, meaning let them do what they want or acquiesce because, quite frankly, we don't want to see you shot. There you go. Now, Russia's also trying to control mobile connections as well. In recent weeks, as I've mentioned, basically a new mobile company has popped up in Kherson, and images showing these blank SIM cards, basically totally white with no branding, are being sold. Meaning, if you're buying a new SIM card for your phone, you're getting this one that I just talked about a short while ago, that is based out of Russia, and these basically appear to put you into mobile networks that are using the Russian +7 prefix at the start of the number, not the standard Ukrainian one. Now, videos reportedly also show crowds of citizens gathering to collect SIM cards. Quote, the Russian forces realize they're at a disadvantage if they keep using Ukrainian mobile networks. That's according to Cathal McDade. He or she is the chief technology officer at mobile security company Adaptive Mobile. Now, the company has seen two separatist mobile operators in Donetsk and Luhansk expand their territory. They are covering basically newly occupied areas as well. But who controls the internet matters. And this is the last point I'm going to take from Mr. Burgess here, who I think had a great article on this. And I quote him directly, while most countries place only limited restrictions on the websites people can view, a handful of authoritarian nations, including China, North Korea, and Russia, severely limit what people can access. And that is 100% true. Similar to China, and I've talked about China's censorship of Google and other American platforms, or just even international platforms outside of China, Russia, interestingly enough, is no different. If you recall, in 2021, they actually did a dry run, essentially disconnecting themselves temporarily from the entire world's internet to make sure that their internal intranet, meaning the internet that essentially stops at the borders that their people can use, is still there. They have their own answers to everything from Facebook to Google, and so there you are. If you are using essentially Russian internet as a Ukrainian, they're going to be monitoring that, meaning as you are, let's say, going on Twitter, assuming Twitter's allowed, and saying, free Ukraine, screw Russia, all that kind of stuff. This is stuff that they are now seeing as you are routing traffic, and if you've got one of their SIM cards on there, it's even easier for them to track you. So if you are in Ukraine and you are watching this or listening to this, and I do have, just by virtue of the work I've done speaking, with the Ukrainian government over the last few months, you are watching or listening to this, understand that you have to essentially be as secure as you possibly can. Publicly posting things, through Russian social media is a way to get yourself identified or GPS located. I've also talked about the electronic warfare side of this. If you want to basically have secure communications, even if you're traveling through Russia, make sure you're using encrypted apps on your phone like Signal, for example, that essentially it basically cannot be read. They can see it route possibly through the Signal network, but Signal is end-to-end encrypted. And there are others out there like Telegram and Wickr and a whole bunch of others, but just make sure you're staying safe. And if you're basically trying to move sensitive information or communicate in any which way, shape, or form, you've got to make sure you're adding layers of encryption, because understanding when, I am, let's say, sending a message from Kyiv to Kherson, it's going to go through Russian infrastructure now. And that is a very important note. And I'm assuming that the Ukrainian military and intelligence operations understand this, but this applies to the rank and file people, meaning if you're a citizen and you are in Ukraine right now and you are, let's say, in the West talking to friends, family, or government in the East, you've got to understand that essentially anything you do can be looked at or captured by the Russians if it's going through Russian-based infrastructure and Russian-based internet service providers. So make sure you're using encrypted everything. Make sure that you are covering yourself, and please, for the love of God, stay safe and stay alive in a war zone. But that is your news of the day. Obviously, this is a rather terrifying set, because if this happens, then all of those millions of citizen journalists that we have seen taking images and videos and everything essentially go away. Basically, they can be blocked as they are uploading to Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or any other social media platform, even Google Drive. They can go ahead and start blocking those kinds of things. So make sure that you are being safe. Make sure that you are continuing to, keep this information out there, but make sure that you are being as obfuscated as you can. Use VPNs, use encryption. It's so important. And that is your unfortunate news of the day. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. And if you're in Ukraine, absolutely attempt to stay private. Thanks, everyone.